Milwaukee. This is once again welcome. This is Inside Movies Galore. This is episode 12, and the first thing we have here, folks, is an interview with director J. Anthony and actor Timothy Cox. Tim, Jay, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
So I understand in November you have a film coming out. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first and how you got involved in the film industry and how you came up with your idea?
Oh wow, let's see how we start about myself. Well, first off, I'm a guy from Jamaica, Queens, New York. My name is Jay Antonio. I'm a writer director, and this is a crazy business, and I'm happy for you to give me an opportunity to talk about my film. Hello to everyone out there that's listening. So where do we begin? I will say that I started out wanting to just be a writer, just write novels and comic books, and it was really tough to get published. And then I saw all these opportunities with video production on YouTube and everything else, and I said, okay, maybe I can do some short films and maybe a movie, and then go into actually writing novels, which is what I'd rather do. So I'd say I was in college studying English and minor in economics when at my school, John Jay College, there were so many productions going on. It was literally you're walking through the hallway and there's Kevin Bacon, there's Jamie Foxx. I was a big fan of White Collar, so there was the White Collar cast in maybe 20 feet from where I was. So I went to the administration doing a town hall meeting, and I told them in front of everybody, hey, how come you guys have all these Hollywood people using our campus? Can't the students use the campus to shoot? Luckily for me, and here's a tip for anyone that's listening, you always want to be the only one in the area you're doing something that's really unique. So I was the only student at a school that wanted to do film because everyone in that school wanted to do criminal justice. So here I was, making short films alongside Hollywood productions. It was really funny. I was actually fighting for space at the school with some production companies. So the school was happy that some student actually wanted to use the school. So they gave me some money to hire some outside people, and I did 2 short films at the school. I had to use actors from the college, so I didn't bring anyone from the outside, but I could bring crew, because there wasn't anyone in the school that was skilled enough to help me shoot. So I did 2 short films, and then after I graduated, I did a music video. And then after studying the game for a while and seeing how everyone does it, the game for breaking into film has been the same for a while. It's basically do a short film, enter it into a few festivals, get a buzz off your short film, and hopefully that short film leads to you making a feature. I didn't want to wait. So I wrote a feature and I tried to get it funded, and I needed a lot of money. So that feature was the one that's sitting for my next film. I needed to make something quick and simple, but interesting enough. So working as a night doorman for the past maybe 10 years, a lot of people during my years would say to me, you should make a film about this. You should do some vignettes. You should do something. And I never really wanted to do it because it was my day job. The last thing I wanted to do was make a movie about, where I worked. But I don't know, it just happened one night. 2 women happened to be arguing in front of me about noise. And I said, wait a second, there is a story here. There is a very deep, there is a deep connection here. There's something magical happening in front of me that I need to put on screen. So it was that happened around last January. And then I went and I started watching Clerks. And Kevin Smith's Clerks gave me the model to do the whole film. I just watched how he did it with his friends, and I read about how he funded it and everything. And what I respect about Kevin Smith versus all the other guys that came up, he didn't do it without an older producer. A lot of guys, when you read about even Spike Lee, Scorsese, they all had an older producer that was like a teacher at their school.
A name.
Not even
or a name,
Yeah, a name, but mostly for them, they had a mentor. And Kevin Smith didn't have any mentor, and I don't have a mentor. I have a lot of people in my life that I could ask for questions, but I didn't have anybody right by my side. So I really attached to everything he did. So for me, it was, I'll write this movie about a night doorman's first night on the job and all the crazy things that happens in New York. So that's basically what I did back in February. And then we went through March, April, May, June, trying to get funding, trying to get the location, trying to get the actors. So that was a process in itself, and every step of the way was a lot of roadblocks. So I was really lucky to get the film made, much less have it coming out soon. So, and shout out to Amazon and Vimeo, because they open up a platform for people who don't always get into the festivals, and you don't really have an opportunity to get into a screen, a theater. So with the online services, you can actually upload your movie and build your audience. Because I know I have an audience. I wouldn't get into this if I didn't know I had all the building workers that would be into the movie. That's like my main audience. That's what I tell everybody. Before you write something and create it, I mean, you should have a passion for what you're doing, but you got to be serious and think, if someone's going to invest in my product, is there an audience for it? Are there people who are going to sit there and give me their time? Forget about money. People waste money all the time. But time is something that, you know, you're asking for, and you got to be willing to really, when you're going to engage in that person, you don't want to hear them say, "Oh my God, I just wasted, you know, an hour of my life on your film or something." So that's the last thing I ever want to hear from anyone. So yeah, that's basically me. This is my first movie coming out. I got plans to start my own studio and do a lot more. I've been reading up on Soderbergh. He has a really, really cool plan for his stuff. So I've been trying to reach out to him and talk to him about what he's planning to do, because I want to take away the power from the studios, give it back to the artists, and just make fun movies that are interesting.
All right. Did you have any problems working with your cast and crew? Did you have any? Did everything run smoothly enough for you?
I would say the way I planned it, because all actors, when they come on set, they're used to being on there for long hours, and they're used to having this artistic director who is very, you know, pushy and bossy. And I didn't want to do that to them. A lot of my actors didn't know me. We met very shortly before the shoot, and I told them all straight up, you're not going to be on set more than 4 hours. You're going to come in an hour before, you're going to run your lines with my producer, you're going to do your hair and makeup while you're running your lines, and then when you come on set, I won't keep you more than an hour. You're going to rehearse, we're going to block you. And a lot of the times, most of the scenes ran for like 15, 20 minutes, because the way I did the takes, being that I was so low budget and I didn't have a lot of time on the set that I was using, I only did 2 takes. Sorry, 3 shots, 2 takes. So two wide, 2 medium, 2 close-ups. So every actor, that's all we basically did. And there weren't many cuts. It was just one constant long shot. And so that was the plan. So a lot of the actors were pretty cool. I wouldn't say I had many problems with the actors or the crew. I would say I had it in the building where I was using, because the people lived there weren't happy with anyone coming and filming on the premises. And the fact that we weren't allowed to bring a lot of equipment, they didn't look at us like we were legit, because they didn't see the big trucks. They didn't see a big team. They saw just a small crew and a few actors. So they thought, oh, this is some college production. Let's really railroad them. So and then even getting into the location was difficult, where the people told me, if at any time you stop any of our residents or anything, we're going to kick you out of the building. So I had to take everything on the chin.
Okay. So now you mentioned something about the actors bringing their own makeup. Now, did they mostly bring their own makeup, or did you actually have a makeup person on set?
No, I had a makeup person. I'm saying they did their hair and makeup while they were rehearsing their lines. It was the first hour they came in and we touched them up, and they'd be also going over their lines while getting their hair and makeup done.
Okay. But I was just asking, because some people don't. Some people do have hair and makeup people that are on the set and whatnot. So it all depends upon your budget too. So
yeah. I got lucky. I was able to get a camera person, an AC. I got an AD. I had a producer. I should shout their names out in case. So my main producer was Una Petrovic. So her and I started the whole project together, and then I had Magda. What's her last name? I can't remember her last name. Right. Magda was my hair and makeup person. And
Magda Surreal.
Surreal, yeah. It was on the tip of my tongue. Magda Surreal was my hair and makeup. It was a very small crew. So basically, my camera guy was Valentine Furcash. I had my sound person, Jennifer Hamala. My makeup person. And then after that, it was just the producer, myself, and an AD. My AD was Liria Salani. And that was it for the crew. And the rest of it was just actors.
Okay.
We would just going skeleton crew all the way.
Sounds cool. Did you have fun making it? And did you have any favorite scenes from the film that you wanted to express? I know it's coming out in November, and I know you don't really want to say too much of the film, but why don't you give us a favorite scene?
I think I definitely had fun making it, although it was very testing at times. But favorite scene, I'd probably say, looking back on it, I always change my mind. But right now, probably because Tim is here, I think Tim's scene was pretty funny because Tim comes in and he has this big argument that's pretty funny. And just when he walks off, what he says to the guy, it really sticks with me. So Tim's scene is pretty interesting because that's one of the scenes I actually lived through myself personally. So that was writing this film. There was some from personal experience, but mostly from other stories I heard rolling around with other guys. So I'd probably say Tim's scene where he has an interaction with the doorman and the locksmith, and things try to kind of blow up right in front of the doorman's face. So
that was fun to do. That was a lot of fun.
Well, what is the name of your production company? I know I tend to forget that things here. So, but what is the name
Sacred? Sacred 9 Films. So Sacred, SACRED, the number 9, and films, and that's named after the 9 Greek muses. I was in English class, and I was reading about all the writers and poets in the 17th century, and they would go into the forest and they would invoke the muses, and they would call them every time before they wrote something. They would call upon the muses to inspire them. And I started looking like who the hell these muses are. So I looked into the 9 Greek muses, and I was like, oh wow, they look good. 9 women giving me inspiration. I'm with it.
Oh my God.
So when I sit down to write in my crib, I call these women. I said, yo, surround me and whisper in my ear what the world wants to know about. So.
Say out muse.
Well, also on the show we have Tim, who actually acted in this film. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. See everybody.
The reason why I wanted you here on the show is because you've also been in many other short films as well, besides being in this film. But first, I'm going to ask you about how your experience was on working with Jay Antonio, knowing that it was his first film and whatnot. Did you have fun? Did you? And why don't we begin with you began in film?
Where I began, well,
tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm originally from Philadelphia, and I have lived in New York since 2001. And when I moved here, all I ever wanted to be was a good supporting actor in the theater, doing Shakespeare and Chekhov and all of that kind of thing. And that's what I did exclusively from about 2001 to like 2010, with an occasional film appearance, but I was never happy with myself in film. And then at around 2010, I auditioned for a film called Socks and Cakes. It was a New York Film Academy MFA project, and it was a good script, really interesting character, good. It was from an really interesting Italian director named Antonio Padovan. And it turned out to be really good. And then it was going to festivals and getting some nice press. And I thought, maybe it'll be like this all of the time. And pretty much since then, 2010, I've almost exclusively done film, working. I'm, supporting character kind of parts, lots of dads, lawyers, doctors, cops, the occasional serial killer. And I met Jason. He posted something on Queens Filmmakers, which is a Facebook page. And I saw the posting for the film, and I submitted, and where he was having, I met him at his office, which was not far from my home, and went in, and I liked his enthusiasm, and he showed me the script. And the thing that really sold me also was that he showed me a couple of scenes from the film. He showed me there's a deli scene that Jason Torres and Lester Green and many of the other actors appear in, and I loved just it just reminded me of Clerks, and it reminded me of Jim Jarmusch films like Night on Earth and oh God, what's another? Oh, Coffee and Cigarettes. And just based on what I saw and on Jason's enthusiasm, and I liked the character. I knew that there was a lot of comic potential for this kind of character. The character I play is this rather irascible, a guy who goes from 0 to 10 in seconds. And I just, people in New York who they're in their kind of own universe, very egocentric, very selfish. And all he wants to do is just come in and, kind of lock his girlfriend out. And of course he has to get his key. And poor Jason Torres, has to be in the middle of all of this drama. But no, I mean, exactly like Jason said, like we would get to set, and it was funny. It was kind of a revolving door. Like as I was coming in, there were actors who had finished their scenes and they were leaving, but I had a chance to meet Brandon Shaw, and I know Bob Youngren, who played the priest, and Vincent Ford, and it was exciting and it was kind of fun. It was kind of like a little like repertory theater in a way. You're just kind of off in the wings, waiting for your moment to go on. And they did your makeup, you ran the lines, and once you went on and did it, like Jason said, we did it a couple of times. And I appreciated it because we were able to just go through the entire scene. So you developed a rhythm. When you're doing a scene, whether it's in theater or in film, you want to find there's music. It's like jazz. And when it's cooking, it's the greatest feeling in the world. And if you don't have, like the way Woody Allen shoots his films, he doesn't do a lot of close-ups. He'll shoot an entire 10-minute scene, just in like, wide shot. And it's because it's just less about the close-ups and just more about, the actors in the situation and telling the story. Jason was trying to go for, I think, the same thing. And yeah, we just did it a couple of times. I got to yell at some people and, that was it. And had a blast doing it.
Alrighty. I'm going to bring KJ in here for a moment. He had a few of the films that I actually sent over a few of the films for him to watch so that he could gain a little bit perspective. And he expressed some interest in interviewing you for a moment. KJ, why don't you go ahead and ask him about some of the films that you're interested in learning about.
Sure. Well, Mr. Cox, it's nice to meet you. Also,
likewise.
It's also nice to meet you too, and very interesting listening to you. The first questions I do have for you, Timothy, are: when you get into a role, what is your process?
It's different for every character. The thing that's always where you start, it's always the script. I'll give you an example. With a Simple Mind, I played a serial killer. This was something that was completely different than anything I'd ever done. But it always comes down to the quality of the writing. And you start with that, and basically you just try to you find objectives. What's the character fighting for? What's their objective? What do they want? And it's and a lot of people think that those are just kind of basic things, but it's all about being specific. Scene. If I'm in a scene with a young woman and the basic objective is he wants to ask her out on a date, you got to go deeper. You dig a little deep. He not only wants to date her, I want this woman to be the mother of my children. And so, you play, and that's how you can play. The more specific you are, the more grounded and more fruitful the work is. And so with me, in the end, the process, it always starts with, I always go with the script there. And then a lot of the times it's planet imagination. A lot of the kinds of, when you're a character actor, if the script is good, your job is a large portion of your job is already done. The thing, Night Job, for example, the character of Mr. Jones, it was very clear on the page who this guy is. So all I had to do was just show up and not mess it up. And a big thing also is listening. Listening, I think, as far as an actor, it's probably the largest portion of what it is, because and it's listening. And as far as, there are actors, like, they'll get a script and be like, well, my God, this guy, he only has two lines of dialogue, but
Right.
you can say pages of dialogue in a look, in a turn. I mean, go back and watch anything that Gene Hackman has ever done, or Spencer Tracy or Kathy Bates. Those are, I mean, you watch them, and so, but it's different with every role, and that's kind of the fun part. It's kind of like a little detective work.
Now, was Night Job your first feature?
No, I did a film called Argyle a couple of years ago. I guess it was about 7, 8 years ago, and it was a feature film. But what the producers of the film took, there was a 10-minute portion from that film that they cut and re-edited as a short film, which is called Gundersons. And I'm amazed that they did that. I mean, I was very flattered, but because it's a very, very funny little short film. But Argyle was probably the first feature film that I worked on, which I did in about 2009, 2010. But certainly, Night Job of feature films, it's certainly the one. I mean, it's getting a very nice reaction. We have a very nice, solid fan base on social media, Facebook. I think we have over, what, 15,000 followers, I think? Or
20,000 by tomorrow, I believe. We're
Wow.
at 800 and something.
Ooh, very nice. Very nice.
I do want to ask you and Mr. J. Antonio both a question that I think both of you probably encounter a lot. How important really is it for the director and the actor to truly be on the same page?
It's super important, but I will say sometimes you got to let the actor do their thing. I've worked with over 50 actors on this one movie alone, and what I found very interesting was the skilled actors don't like improv. The skilled actors come in, want to just be given lines, be told how you want them to be, and then the ones that are really new to the game, they want to do improv, and some of them aren't good at doing improv. But the main thing was it's a team effort, so you can't just walk up to a person you aren't so much familiar with and say, I want you to be this and do that. Sometimes it's really good to say, what do you think about this character? How do you feel that you would approach it? I'll tell you what I want, but I want to listen to what you think that you think how you should portray the actor. Sometimes they're a little too far off, and I tell them, no, that's not what I'm going for. But a lot of times people impress me, and I let them roll with how they want it to be, and they had more fun that way.
I think the big thing is, I mean, the director and the actor need to be on the same page, because in the end, the actor is trying to present the director's vision. It's kind of like, the director is kind of the painter, and the actor is just like one of the instruments and pieces of the whole kind of the painting. My thing is, with me, in the case of Night Job, I mean, you know the lines, but you know them so well so that when you get on set, you take in the energy of the set, the energy of the room, the energy, and you try to leave some room open for spontaneity, things that happen, because that's when the magic happens, like the happy accidents. That's when it's fun. And the thing is, for me, my performance in Night Job came from Jason, really, from just because he was so earnest and so nice and polite that it actually kind of made me mad. That, like, I have a genuine problem here, and like Jason's kind of very nice demeanor actually kind of made me mad and kind of fed. So I think
you're talking about Jason Torres, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So what you're given also, and just if you remain open, but I think also just trying to deliver what the director initially intended on the written page, but try to blow it up a little, make it fun.
Well, from what I understand, being an actor, you kind of have to improv a little bit at times too, with certain roles. Have you had to do a lot of improving, or did the directors have more of a direction that you had to go? In
There's a funny thing I think about improvisation. Most people, I think, when they do improvisation, they automatically try to be funny. The thing about really, really good improvisation is, and very few people are, I mean, when you think of like the Christopher Guest and people like that, they don't just think of that off the top of their head. They rehearse weeks and weeks and weeks, and they say, okay, well, this works, that doesn't work. There's a great story on the set of In the Heat of the Night. They were shooting for a couple of weeks, and Norman Jewison, the director, realized that there was not a really major scene between Rod Steiger and Sidney Poitier. And I said, you got like two heavy hitters here. They got to have like a really big scene, a scene where they're not yelling at each other, a scene where like, you learn a little about the soul of these guys. So what they did is they got into a car. Norman Jewison was there. A script person was there, had a pad and paper. And Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger improvised this scene. And Norman Jewison, like, they went back and they thought, okay, we'll keep this, we'll keep that. You type it up. And then they gave it to him and they memorized it. And it's the scene in the film where Sidney Poitier is at Rod Steiger's house. And Rod Steiger has that wonderful moment where he just says, oh, don't you just feel really lonely sometimes? And he's bearing his soul, which in Mississippi, in Sparta, Mississippi in the 1960s, a white sheriff didn't do that with an African-American man. And then Sidney Poitier says, no more than you. And Rod Steiger just shifts right back into don't get smart, boy. And it was just, it's one of the most memorable scenes of the movie. But that to me is an effective form of improvisation. If you go on a film set and you just talk out of your ass, you can't make a movie that way. So what in some of the cases of the films I've done, you do a couple of takes. In my experience, I found, like when I've worked with Sean Meehan, who's a guy I've worked with, I think 6 or 7 times since 2010.
Dial Tone Pictures?
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Dial Tone is, Sean is Cross River Pictures. He did Total Performance. Okay. And what Sean will have us do, we'll do a couple of scenes as written. And then occasionally from time to time, he'll give you a freebie. And they may not even use anything in that, but as the actor, you feel kind of free. And sometimes it's crap. Most of the time it is crap. But as an actor, it's kind of free to be able to do that. But again, most of the time, if you have a good script, you don't have to do any of that kind of stuff.
Okay. The actual first short film that I actually got from you was actually called Here Lies Joe. I figured I'd ask you about that one a little bit, before we move on to a few other short films, and then we'll get to our film discussion here. So,
absolutely.
How is it working with the director of Here Lies Joe?
Mark
and
Battle.
What did you think?
Mark.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, Mark Battle. He's the director, and he co-wrote the script with Pam Conway. And no, that was a wonderful experience. That's another one of those, that character of Bill. He's the head of a Suicide Anonymous group where the two main characters, Joe, played by Dean Temple, and this very vivacious, energetic fireball, Z, played by Andy Morrow, meet. The most unlikeliest of places for a guy and a girl to meet. And I just play this very genuinely sweet, earnest guy who I think is, I think he's in a little in over his head. He's in the movie for 2 minutes, but that's an example of when I read that script and I read that part, and I thought, oh my God, I got to do this. And that's the thing is, it doesn't matter the size of the part. I mean, any good actor can make 2 lines feel like Hamlet. And that's, because it's something like, there's just something when you read a script, whether it's a leading role or a supporting role, there's something that jumps out at you. It's kind of like, if it's a part that, well, God, I know this person, or I am this person, or if the part scares me, that's even better.
Okay.
I mean, but the thing I liked about Bill and Here Lies Joe and working with Mark is that he was just a genuinely sweet, nice, very earnest, decent man.
Okay.
Can I say one thing though? And it's going back to what you said, Mr. Cox earlier, and that is you were talking about sometimes certain actors it can only be 1 or 2 lines that they say, and it's really so good to the point where you really remember that. Do you really like the fact? And I'm not trying to say this to categorize you. You're like a character actor.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I would say
Oh, yeah.
that throughout Night Job or
Go ahead and
Shooting Stars,
categorize.
Simple Mind. You're like a character actor, like the Strother Martin or the Jack Elam or the.
Oh,
God,
man. Oh,
on
Brother
and on.
Martin, you're rattling off some classics there. Well, that's from the time I was started doing this work.
Mhm.
I knew that I was a character actor from the time doing theater 14, doing the Shakespeare stock characters. Because one of the things I think it's really, really important, the reason why I think I'm still have a little bit of sanity is that I know where I fit.
Right.
When you're an actor, this is a business where it's sometimes it has less to do with your talent and how you look. And I'm 5'6". I'm stocky. I wear glasses. I'm a character actor. But the reality is, it's like a lot of the actors that you rattled off, like Strother Martin and Jack Elam and people like that. Those were guys that you look at their resumes. They got resumes that could choke a horse, because
Over 100 credits.
oh God, all any actor really wants at the end of the day is to be able to wake up, go to a set, go to a play rehearsal, and just do your job. I've never wanted to be a movie star or anything like that, because it's such a really unrealistic goal. So I'm definitely a character actor, and character roles I think are richer. I mean, you look at J.K. Simmons in Whiplash. I mean, you knew in the trailer that guy's going to walk away with the movie and win every award that is out there. Same thing, when oh God, who's the when anything Kathy Bates or Patricia Clarkson, the character actors, because when you're a character actor, you're playing it's smart and you're playing the long game, because it's about charting out a career. It's not about, well, I want to do a reality TV show and make money and then be done in 5 years. No, you want to think about 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and about a life. So yeah, definitely a character actor, and I love it.
Okay. What did you think about working with the director Matthew Mahler in the film called What Jack Built? And
Matt is when I first worked with Matt, I think I worked with him on a film called Dark Romance. I've done 3 films with Matt. I've done Dark Romance, What Jack Built, and recently we did another one called To Be Alone. And Matt, I think, is 20, 21 years old. When I first worked with him, I think he was 14 or 15. This kid knows more about movies and, writing and directing and scoring. He's a marvel. He's amazing to watch. And the thing about and the thing also with, especially To Be Alone, he has an ability. He has a talent to kind of almost look through you as an actor and just know exactly how to shape and mold you. And that's just it's amazing to watch, and of course, it's a marvel. I mean,
it's a marvel. I mean,
he's 20, 21 years old, and
21 years
you
old,
know
and
that
you know
in
that
10, 15, 20 years,
20 years,
he's going to get even better.
Even better.
So I love working with Matt.
Cool.
I'm sorry.
How did you like working on Dirty Books?
That's another one. Let's see. I finished Here Lies Joe, and then went to work on that the next weekend. Another great character part. And loved working with Zach Lapierre and Matt Rendini and Ian Everhart. Really smooth, solid, easygoing, fun group of guys.
Okay.
I do want to interject real quickly.
Go ahead.
One question. And that is for Mr. Cox. Because when I saw Simple Minds, the one thing that I really was not just your performance, but it was also the director who was Phil Newsom. The way he shot you. Did you have any interjection, or did you have any sort of opinion that you told him as far as you shooting from this side or that side? And that also goes into another question.
One thing, guys, I'm able to hear myself when I talk, and when you guys are talking, it's kind of like a double reverb. I don't know what's happening.
You're possessed.
Everything everybody says is being repeated immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
Sign in and sign out real quick.
All right.
Tim's computer's possessed.
It sounds like
Now, do you?
sounds like he's got the interview on in the background.
Let me just test it here.
Tim's watching himself.
Wait.
How do you?
It's happening to me too. What's going on?
I'll be right back.
Jason's profile is repeating it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Where should I click? Click that off.
Yeah, he's the only one that doesn't echo.
Who's?
Maybe have Jason sign out and sign back in.
All right. I'm sorry. Let me sign out. I'll be back.
Yeah,
That's
and
cool.
I just came back in. Not here in doubles now. So
Cool.
Right, echo's gone.
But someone was asking about
I was asking
Phil Newsom.
And it was with Simple Minds. I love the way that he shot you, the different angles that he got you. I mean, really great. Did you have anything to do with that whatsoever? Or have you had that experience with a director where, they ask you, like, how do you want me to shoot you? Or come look at the dailies or anything that you shot and, like, do you think I should come here on you or there? Have you had that, and did that happen while you were shooting in Simple Mind?
No, he had, I trust him. And that's the thing is, my job is to show up and play the part, and I don't, I don't tell the cameraman where to set up shots and stuff. The thing about with that particular movie, Phil had, and like a Hitchcock kind of a style and the way he did the camera that just, and I usually don't watch dailies and things like that, just because, I think that, if you watch, you kind of second guess kind of things. And, but now I do it. My big thing is that I try to give as many options in the editing room that they can play around with. I mean, there are a lot of things that you may do that may get completely thrown out, but no, I didn't. It was all kind of, I wanted to be surprised as much as you guys were in the audience.
Hey, so I'm going to only ask you about one more short film here, and then we're going to take it over here to KJ, see if he has anything else, and then we'll go on to the film discussion. So,
Sure.
One of my favorite shorts that you sent me was actually Choosing Sides.
I love that one.
How was it working with your fellow actress there?
Rachel Jackson. It was wonderful. Rachel and I, we had actually met, I guess, like a couple of months before. We had worked on a spec commercial, and I was playing like a shrink, and she was a wife, and it was another actor who was a husband. So when we kind of got together for this, it was like, oh, and it's another example of just something that was really funny, incredibly well written. We shot that on a Sunday afternoon in an apartment in off Central Park West. And I just remember being in the apartment. We were not allowed to touch anything because, you know, it's a lot of money in those apartments. And, you know, us supporting actors, we don't have a lot of it. So, no, I mean, that was a lot of fun. I mean, Lee, really marvelous director in Yale who wrote the script. It was just really funny. And it's another one of my favorites, just because in 5 or 6 minutes, you know exactly who all three of these characters are. And it's just, you know, it's the testament to just, I think, really solid writing.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. KJ, did you have anything else to interject about any other
questions? Just 2 final questions before we get into the taxi driver discussion, because I'm really anxious for that discussion myself.
So am I.
But I have one for Mr. Cox and one for Mr. Antonio, and I'll be done. I guess I'll go ahead and start with Mr. Cox. The last question I will ask you is just simply, what is the most personal role that you've taken on that really kind of had an effect on you, or still has possibly an effect on you even to this day?
Wow. Well, I have to say, To Be Alone, which is another film that I did with Matt Mahler, which I did just a couple of months ago.
Right.
And it didn't even occur to me until I just thought about it recently watching the film. One of my brothers passed away at the start of the year. And, you know, this is a movie that it's about a man who's dealing with grief and kind of has issues with questions, I guess, his faith and with religion and things like that. And I think that's something that I can certainly relate to. And I didn't consciously think of my brother's passing or anything when I was doing the film, but when I watch the film, I look at, you know, there are moments when I look at that, and you know, I see like kind of the sunken eyes, you know. Yeah, I mean, I would say of recently, that's probably one that's very, very personal. Just because, I mean, that's another example. I don't speak a line of dialogue in that movie, but I hope that I'm able, you know, through a look or body language, that you're able to convey this man's anguish and grief and sadness and anger too. So yeah, I think that's definitely the most personal one, certainly of the recent things I've done.
And my condolences to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And my last question for Mr. Antonio is kind of like a 2-in-1. The first part of it is, if you did have a $40+ million budget, what short film, or even your feature night job, I mean, which film would you choose that you've already done, not something that you could be planning or in the future? Which one would you actually revisit with a $40+ million budget and actually remaster or make over again?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I've only done a few things. Are you guys hearing me?
Oh yeah.
No, we're clear. Okay, sorry, I can't hear myself. All right, so that's a good question. So I did this one short film called A Dizzy Affair, and I did another one called Exits. And I'd probably go back and do Exits. Exits was it's a psychological thriller about students at a school. So I kind of took John Hughes' The Breakfast Club, and I made it into sort of a psycho horror. And I think I probably want to, I had written a whole big production for it, but I couldn't shoot it with the budget I had. But I had this idea for that to be a really cool, gory horror slasher, psychological thriller. So I'd probably go back and do Exits for sure.
And the second part of the question would just be, as we end on this note, is just like, what advice or what thoughts would you give to, I mean, people who are trying to get in the film, people who are currently in it, and they could be struggling? Like, what's the advice that you would give for those still striving on to get to a certain point within their own careers?
All right. Yeah, thank you for asking. And shout out to everybody who's listening, whether you're watching the rebroadcast or currently listening. Thank you so much. I think everyone tells me the same thing, just keep going. But I think there's a lot more going on. You definitely have to kind of always study the business. When I studied everyone that made it, I found out that there's a whole bunch of people in the race. And the individuals who stand out by doing one thing that's different or ahead of everyone else are the ones who really leave their mark. For instance, I'm a doorman. There's tons of doormen in New York City working. I'm the only one that's making a movie. So naturally, I get a lot of attention from the press because out of this community, I'm the only one. Same thing when I was at John Jay College. I was the only student that wanted to make films. I'm sure there were others, but no one was really pushing it. And so what I want to say to all of you guys is, you got to look at how you can be the only one that can shift and be different amongst so many people. Everybody wants to make a movie. What is it about your movie is going to turn someone from looking one direction towards you? And you have to look within yourself and find out. I mean, everyone can do a genre film. Everyone's going to do a horror. Everyone's going to do an action. But you want to, amongst that genre, you have to find that intimate story that's about you, that's going to turn people's heads towards you. And I think that's what people need to understand is you got to know yourself before you begin exposing yourself to the world. You got to know what you stand for, who you are, and what you're trying to be. I know who I am. I'm a blue-collar guy who wants to enter the film business amongst the elite, who went to the best schools, who have financing from their families and friends. I don't have any of that. All I have going for me is I want to tell the story for the everyday Joe, the blue-collar guy, of what our struggles are. And that's me. That's what I'm good. That's what my movies are going to be who my movies are going to be dedicated to. So that's what I think everyone needs to, don't look on the TV screen at the Oscars and think that you're going to be that person. No, you need to be yourself amongst everyone else. So that's my advice.
Much respect, Mr. Antonio and Mr. Cox. Thank you both for your answers.
Thank you very much.
All righty. Now we're getting to the discussion on Martin Scorsese's
Daisy.
Scorsese.
I never knew about that guy.
Gotcha.
Scorsese, from 1979, starring Robert De Niro.
1976.
Yep.
1976.
76.
Swing and a miss.
Jodie
1976.
Harvey Keitel.
Jodie Foster, Harvey Keitel, and
Shepherd, baby.
many other definitely different actors and actresses. So because you guys are from New York, I'm going to start with you guys. Jay, why don't you tell me what this film means to you when you first saw it, and go ahead. What were your thoughts on the film?
So I'm hanging with my homie one day. My friend, later we found out he was schizophrenic or something, but I don't know why he wanted to see this movie. So we're teenagers, and he says, Jay, let's go see the movie Taxi Driver. And I was like, what? He said, yeah. So we go to the video store, back when they had video stores, and we get a cassette tape. And the tape was so old and beat up that we could barely watch the movie, but we watched it really slowly. You know, rewinding, tracking. Remember tracking on the VCR? So we had to watch this Taxi Driver because my friend wanted to watch it. I still don't know why, but later on it made sense. So the impression I first got in Taxi Driver was, holy shit, there's a part of New York that's really crazy that I didn't know about. I grew up in the 90s, and I grew up with like gangs and stuff and that kind of stuff, but I only heard stories about what happens in New York and Times Square. When you're in Queens, a lot of guys don't leave their borough. If you were born in the Bronx or grew up in Brooklyn, sometimes you don't even leave and go to Manhattan. So Manhattan was this mysterious place where we never knew what really happened over there. So when we saw Taxi Driver, we were like, holy smoke, there's a lot of drugs and hookers over there. So that was my first impression. Then I rewatched it once, you know, I started studying film, and I had to say, they said, watch the great. So I had to watch a lot of Scorsese movies. And Second time watching it, it really moved me with his camera work and his scoring and how the characters were so smooth. They didn't overact. There are some scenes where I wished De Niro would have really just exploded. That's why I always say Pacino would have been so much better.
He turned it down.
Right, he turned it down. Wow. Yeah,
He turned it down. Dustin Hoffman turned it down. And the funny thing is, Paul Schrader wrote this for Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
oh wow, Jeff Bridges.
That would have been
Amazing.
interesting. But yeah, I mean, just interesting to hear that kind of thing.
But right now it's just for me it just encapsulates what New York was and how between the people things haven't shifted because there's still jealous husbands out there like when Scorsese takes on the role as the man in the cabbie who wants to go after like, for cheating on him. Although the times have changed where we've evolved with technology and there's so many different issues that we're going through now, that story still stays the same where there's this identity issue amongst people where there's a disconnect and there are those who try to understand what's going on around them. And to this day, I don't think that'll ever, change going forward. There'll always be the circumstance of people who don't quite catch up with the evolution of technology and changes. So that's why the film always connect to me as an outsider.
Okay. Tim, when did you first see the film?
Wow. I'm old enough to remember, and you guys remember the RCA video disc? It was the thing that came out right before VHSs, and my parents would have almost like Beta, and they were just these big kind of like records, and you slide the disc in, you pull the lever, and then it would come on. And so that's how whenever my parents would go out, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to go watch an R-rated movie. So that's how I first watched Chinatown, The Godfather, all of these movies. And the first time I saw Taxi Driver, I think I was 9 years old. I don't remember anything about it because I just remember on the cover of the RCA was a picture of Robert De Niro, and he was holding a gun. And so I saw it at 9, and I remember it was just obviously like a very violent movie. And when I saw it again in high school, because high school, one of the things that I would always do, when I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, you can go to a video store and you could rent classic movies for 99 cents. So I would go in and I would just get a stack of movies. And what I would do, I would pick like a particular actor. And one, whether it's Paul Newman or, James Mason or something like that. And one night I picked like De Niro one weekend. And so watched like Bang the Drum Slowly and Mean Streets, Taxi Driver. And of course, Taxi Driver, I think when Robert De Niro, the first line of his obituary is probably going to be, I think, this movie. I think as brilliant as he is in so many movies like Raging Bull, I think, even just if the film didn't have the "You Talking to Me" scene, because this film catapulted him into the stratosphere of light, and he changed film acting.
Oh, yeah.
Like Brando did with Streetcar. And so, and I guess since that time, I've probably seen the movie altogether maybe about 10 times. I go back every couple of years and just rewatch it, and it just gets better and better because it came out the year I was born, and I'm 40 and that movie just turned 40, and it just gets, you learn and you discover things every time I watch it, like just I love like the trivia of all of the stuff, like the making of the films, like that De Niro, he actually got his cabbie license and would do 15-hour shifts just to do that little bit of extra, just to get into the guts of this guy. Now he's got some balls because riding a taxi in 1976 New York, when we were only a couple of years removed from New York City in 1973, the entire state was broke. Not long after Taxi Driver came out, we had the Son of Sam killings and the worst heat wave in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and probably, I mean, there were people looting the streets.
About every young punk wearing a mohawk.
Yeah. So when this movie came out, it came out at a time when, like around the time when Death Wish came out and The French Connection, where you got to be very careful when you watch this movie, because people, when they watch this movie, they think Travis Bickle is a hero. He's most definitely not. He's not. I mean, in the end of the movie, when Sybil Shepherd gets in the cab and she gets out and he has that wonderful shot, he looks away. He's not cured. He's not healed. I mean, it's ultimately a very, very sad, obviously a very, very sad story. I mean, just about this, a man, dealing with what we know today as post-traumatic stress disorder, but back in 1975, 76, when Paul Schrader was writing this, that was a phrase that just wasn't in, the public's mind and perception. So, but no, it's a movie that, I mean, you go back and you watch it again and again and again, and it just never gets boring.
There's a funny story about De Niro and Scorsese when they were doing research for the movie. They would ride together in taxi cabs. And one time, a known actor hopped in the back of the cab, and he saw De Niro. And De Niro had just won the Academy Award for The Godfather Part 2. And he goes to me, what's going on? He goes to De Niro, what's going on? You just won the Academy Award, and now you're driving cabs? And De Niro goes, it's for research. The guy goes, oh, I know. We all been there. We all been there.
That's what we all say. We all say, yeah, it's research. Yeah.
Oh, hey, real quick aside, did anybody notice that Death Wish was on the marquee in one of the scenes?
Yeah.
Like they're outside a theater?
Yep.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah. I think I noticed that on one of the marquee signs. Speaking of which, Dustin, what your first time or seeing the film, or?
Well, I saw it I first saw it at around 4:00 today. So it was hard to. First things first, I've only ever seen De Niro as an old man, so it was pretty startling. I did not recognize him right away. I know who that is. Oh, okay. But it was pretty cool. I can see why it was like such a lauded classic, and a lot of things weren't necessarily spelled out for you. You had to kind of infer them, like with the post-traumatic, with the PTSD. And it seemed to be a movie that didn't really have like a narrative per se. It's just kind of, you're going to follow this character around for a while. And sort of experience whatever's wrong with him. Like I think in my notes I wrote down mental illness, because there was clearly something wrong with him. And so overall, I mean, it was good, and I'm really glad I saw it. And if I see the collector edition Blu-ray around town, I might just pick it up.
Okay. Katie, was this your first time seeing the film, or did you see it somewhere else, or what were your thoughts on the film?
This was my first time actually sitting and watching it from start to finish. Back when I was younger, my brother was a fan of this movie, and I think probably now, having watched it all the way through, he was probably a fan of it because of all the firearms that were in it. He was a gun guy, so he used to be into the movie, and I never sat down and watched it with him. So when I saw that this was coming up, I thought, good excuse for me to sit down and watch the movie. And I have to admit that the Joe Spinell cameo in the beginning had me immediately thinking, like, this was going to go like a direction like Maniac, something way more
really
twisted.
hoping for that.
Yeah, something way more twisted than what actually ended up.
I believe that Joe Spinelli actually had a writing credit too in the film. I was looking at the credits as well. So if you scroll through the name somewhere.
Sure. Well, and I think
the same universe.
Yeah, I think I've watched too many horror movies lately, and then also I just picked up on Saturday when I was with Trauma. I picked up the last horror film, and Joe Spinell's in that too, and I watched that. So I kind of had this like crazy idea. I thought the Travis character was going to get a lot crazier than he did. He was actually kind of conservative in the crazy department. But overall, I liked the movie. I would definitely watch it again and probably catch some of the things that I missed. I most enjoyed young Harvey Keitel because I don't think I've ever seen him young before. I had seen De Niro young, and I knew that, but I don't think I've ever seen a young Harvey Keitel. So that was interesting. His pimp character and his big long pinky nail was very amusing. So yeah, overall, I liked the movie. I liked the direction that it went, and I can see now all these years later why my brother liked it so much.
Alrighty. Dane, why don't you tell us when you first saw the film and you felt about it recently watching it? I know it's one of your favorites.
Yes, I saw the film, I want to say like freshman or sophomore year of college, and I immediately fell in love with it. It's hands down one of it's one of my three favorite Scorsese films of all time. The other two being The Last Temptation of Christ and Hugo. I absolutely love Taxi Driver because I think it is say that The Godfather is the greatest film of the 70s, but I would say Taxi Driver is for the simple reason that it's actually about the 70s. It's about moral decay, societal decay. It's about very much about politics on a street level. It's about a person struggling to do the right thing amidst a society that has completely fallen apart. And how does one do? That's a common theme in Scorsese's films. What is the right thing to do? And often it's a very spiritual thing. What is the spiritually right thing to do amidst a world that is animalistic and chaotic, and where the directions of what to do and the lines of right and wrong are not always so clearly defined. That's a very common theme in his films, and Taxi Driver really shows that off very beautifully. Plus the fact that it's about someone who on the one hand wants to save a child prostitute from her pimp and wants to clean up the streets, but at the same time is wanting to kill a politician because of the fact that a girl spurned him. So it's not all that far off from Mark David Chapman. It's not all that far off from
John Hinckley and
other shooters. And I mean,
intimately related to this.
And the fact of the matter is that his mentality is not all that far off from some of the people that we're seeing in the streets now, in the wake of Charlottesville and all that. Mm-hmm. Granted, he's not neo-Nazi or anything, but the point is that when one perceives that one society is falling apart, then that makes someone mad, and oftentimes that resorts to violence. And then the question is, who's the target of that violence? And Tarantino, when talking about this film, was saying that the film itself has been decried as being racist, which he disagrees with. He feels like it's not a racist film, but it's a film about a racist, which I never really quite got the racist angle explicitly, other than most of the people that he's not happy with happen to be black. But I don't really feel like that any other race. I feel like he would feel the same way, but that's also not very clear, and it's deliberately open to interpretation. But I think that it is in my opinion, it's the best film of the 70s because it's all about the complete societal and political upheaval of the decade, and I think it only continues to get more relevant the more that our society continues to divide itself along political and racial lines.
As a counterpoint, I'd have said Alien or probably anything else.
I still can't believe Taxi Driver lost to Rocky Best Picture.
Yes, it did. That 1976 had
Network,
Rocky,
All the
Taxi
President's Men.
Yeah, it had a lot of great films.
Well,
I mean, Network had a huge inspiration on me personally from the script level. I think Taxi Driver, impressive film overall out of all, the most impressive film out of all of those in terms of just the overall screenwriting, filmmaking, artistic significance, and all that. Rocky's obviously the most beloved because it's inspirational and it's very
the underdog. They like that.
Yeah, and all three of those are masterpieces in their own way. I do think Taxi Driver has continued to have the most resonance and is among Scorsese's best works to date.
KJ, when did you see the film first, and what was your reaction to seeing it recently?
I just hope I don't get too long-winded.
Bring it on.
But I first saw Taxi Driver probably about, I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago. I saw it on like TCM late night. I didn't even get a chance to really even watch the movie. It was just certain scenes in the movie. And I see De Niro, and I mean, I'd already loved De Niro as a kid from Once Upon a Time in America, Godfather Part 2. I mean, I loved De Niro for a long time. My mother loves him. So I had to kind of watch him growing up. But when I saw Taxi Driver, I actually saw it kind of like a double feature, watching Taxi Driver and Serpico.
Oh, wow. That's a good night of movies. That's a good night of movies.
Yeah, that's another masterpiece from the 70s. I mean, and both of them are in New York, actually. It's funny, but both of them are in New York and show two sides of life. But when you watch this movie, I mean, when I first saw it, it was like watching like kind of like a dream. I've only watched the movie fully through one time. It's like watching kind of like a nightmare to some degree. It's, in my opinion, it's like watching a nightmare because you see the inside of this guy's mind. It's like you're kind of just watching Travis Bickle. I mean, I think it's one of the best character studies to come out of the 70s or period in film. But the one thing I also thought about, I haven't heard anyone say it, but it's also kind of like a New York Western because Scorsese has often cited The Searchers as being his inspiration.
Yeah.
I can see that.
And if you actually look at Travis Bickle is kind of like the 70s version of Ethan Edwards from The Searchers by Ford. Both of them are racist, both of them. Although Ethan Edwards in The Searchers by Ford is much more visible, I mean, compared to Travis. But if you look at Travis' character, I mean, he's so much of an introvert. He's so hidden to the point where you only see like spurts of all of this stuff start to come out of him. But I was looking up on YouTube a few videos about, criticism about the film. And the one thing I saw from one guy, he was talking about the masculinity in this film. Scorsese did an interview with Roger Ebert in '76, and Ebert was asking him about the character, and he said that Travis Bickle's character suffered from the goddess whore complex, speaking more so of the Sybil Shepherd and the Jodie Foster character. And he said the goddess whore complex, you're raised to worship women, but you don't know how to approach them on a human level, on a sexual level. Yep. That's the thing with Travis, the De Niro character, the taxi driver. The girl he falls for, the Sybil Shepherd character, it's really important that she's a blonde, a blue-eyed goddess. And then I was reading some other stuff about the goddess whore complex, which is from Sigmund Freud. Men cannot achieve love in an intimate relationship. It has to be sexual. And that was the one thing I really liked about the movie. Outside the violence, it was really the scenes with Sybil Shepherd and Jodie Foster watching those interactions with De Niro and them, because it was like, at least, especially with this, not Jodie, but Sybil, it was like watching a guy really try to get back into a society that he once knew, but the war took it away from him. And he was, I mean, because there was that one scene when he's in the office when they're doing a political thing, and he has that guy's stickers all over his wall, and the only reason he's doing it is because of her. So I think it's just a very good movie. It's a masterpiece from the 70s, and I just think it's great.
Wouldn't it be interesting if Albert Brooks had a breakdown instead? If we just followed his character, he had the crush on Sybil Shepherd, and all of a sudden De Niro gives him some ammunition and says, "This is what I learned in the war." And we see Al Brooks break down instead. At the end, Albert goes from that little fro to the guy in the mohawk.
Well, and then he turns into his character from Drive.
But there's one thing I want to ask a question, and that was the ending. Like, what did you guys think that the ending was actually real, or was a part of his own kind of imagination, Travis, as he zones out, probably dying?
I actually thought of the. Go ahead.
I thought that was totally real.
I think the ending is totally real. I think when he, when he gets the letters, from Jodie Foster's parents, and he goes back, he's not. It's going to happen again. If the movie went on for another hour or two, it would happen again. And in the newspapers, he's called a hero and stuff like that. But it's like, to echo what I said before, he's not. I mean, he's
Oh my.
and so I think it was totally real, and totally definitely. Because if that went on for another hour or so, it's kind of like, oh God, well, what's he going to do next? Because he's a ticking time bomb. I think that's what Travis is.
I do want to say one thing that I read though, because you said something about him not being a hero. Most people say he's an anti-hero. I don't think he's a hero either. But another criticism that I read about the character was his avengement, which is in the end of the movie. His avengement is spurred on by altruism to rescue them, as far as Jodie Foster, from oppression. But in reality, his attempts are larger attempts to display his masculinity towards the aggressors in his life. Sport, played by Harvey Keitel and those guys. And since he is rejected, he resorts to showing his masculinity in a psychosexual way in the form of violence. Do you agree with that?
Forget that he's about to kill Charles Palantine because Sybil Shepherd rejects him. So he's taking out his sexual frustration on somebody who.
See, I don't think it's just Sybil Shepherd that he's going after Palantine for, because while I was watching the film, he was actually following the belief of Palantine, not just because of Sybil Shepherd anymore. He was actually watching his speeches, so to me, he was actually getting a little bit more into the political thing. But on the same side, in the same spectrum, I believe that he was also starting to think that Palantine wasn't doing things as fast as he thought he should be, especially because of that talk that he had in the taxi cab.
Which, if I may say so, that scene is one of my favorites in the film, and yet I think it's really borderlining on being a crippling contrivance of the film. But the dialogue is so perfect that it almost doesn't matter.
Right, it's too coincidental.
It was, the person running for president happens to stop in an ordinary cabbie's cab and not, because isn't it true that you get like a certain amount of backing, then you get Secret Service protection and that sort of stuff. So it just was like, oh, gee, that's awfully convenient. But again, the conversation they have is that it's like, oh, well, I guess it doesn't matter anymore.
Maybe the rules were looser in the 70s.
Yeah, maybe they were. I don't know.
See, I think that scene in the cab. I think that scene in the cab is very important, because that's when you start to see Travis really start to fully unravel. I think, and I think that's, I mean, and it's just, the amazing thing is I don't think the guy who plays Palantine, I think he may say like 4 or 5 words, and it's just De Niro just going off, and it's just like, every time I watch him, I'm like, oh my God, Travis, you are coming off so crazy right now. But
which not to get overly political on you, but then you find out about like the undercurrent feelings that different members of ordinary society can have, and then you have a candidate like Trump, let's say. I mean, doesn't have to be Trump, but that's just a recent example of somebody who exacerbates the hidden anger of the quote-unquote forgotten Americans or whatever, and then you might hear something like that from your cab driver or from the checkout guy or whatever. Something that they may not have talked about, which again is not to be overly political or not to say that that's the feelings of everybody that voted that way. But the point is, if you have any candidate, any kind of political figure, any political player, any potential demagogue who stirs up the feelings of the people to such a degree that people who are ordinary citizens or appear to be, then the anger, the resentment, the irrationality gets absolutely and stirred up to the point where ordinary people start to sound like lunatics. Yeah. And in this case, it's not all that different, except in that case, it's more of the side effects of war than anything else. But the trigger points are not that.
Are not that clear, or
Yeah, well, the meaning that the point at which Travis Bickle is starting to go over the edge is not all that different from the point at which someone in our modern real life may potentially go over the edge. But in his case, I think it was more the side effects of war than it was about somebody exacerbating their undercurrent and giving legitimacy to their undercurrent feelings of anger or resentment towards people that they don't even know.
One of the things that I noticed about the film is how the camera kind of angled on De Niro's eyes, and De Niro's eyes are very expressive, and just the shadow of the angles, like in the end scene where you see that at Sybil Shepherd's character. Now I'd actually first seen Sybil Shepherd in The Last Picture Show,
Mm-hmm.
It's another great film.
And seeing her, she's a little bit older, not by much, but a little bit, because I believe that film was done earlier. But
Yeah, by about
1971.
Yep, and I basically almost didn't recognize her either because I hadn't seen her in quite some time. But I think that when he looked up at her with his shady glance of eyes, and there was a beginning scene that he was doing that too, where they just kind of focused in on his eyes. I think the way the camera just caught that emotion that was in his glance while he was narrating the story was definitely intelligent throughout the film. Because not only do you get to see inside the mind of this obviously unwinding psychotic nature of his later on in the film, but you get to see more of an emotion without words. So
he says
to me, that's what
I do want to say
are
something.
we talking about in the beginning or in the last scene with him and her in the cab?
kind of both, because he didn't really have a lot of speaking parts. He did a lot of monologue while he was writing in his journal. He was explaining most of this that had already happened. So to me, seeing some of the ways that he glanced, just the way that the camera caught his eyes, that's what I noticed.
I do want to say something about that. Thinking about that last scene when he does look at her in the rear mirror. Because one thing I say about the '70s period, I mean, you could say it for a whole bunch of movies. It's very pessimistic because of the time period just coming out of World War II. I mean, I think once Rocky came out, that's kind of when movies kind of went back to having a happy ending. But when you do see Sybil Shepherd,
Vietnam.
Yeah. But when you do see Sybil Shepherd in that rear view mirror, it's almost as if he's watching like the last form, but also he's watching a dream that he kind of wants, but now he knows for sure, yeah, I really can't have that dream anymore because now I am who I am. So when the camera does cut back to his eyes looking into the mirror, I mean, that was just me basically thinking like, okay, now Scorsese is reminding us, okay, this guy isn't going to change. In
The ending kind of happened. To me, it kind of seemed like it was almost like he was being haunted by her. That because suddenly she was in the car, she was just there. You didn't see her step or anything like that, and then all of a sudden, you didn't see her in the back. So to me, it kind of left me whether it was real or unreal. That last, doing.
Apparently, I had a totally different interpretation of that than you guys. Like I turned it as it's like, oh, hi, I can talk to you and not freak out. I've turned a corner. I'm maybe gonna be okay. Like I didn't get any of this like gloomy ending stuff that you guys did. I'm pretty surprised.
See, that's where I get, that. It's you look in his eyes when he looks in the mirror after she gets out. You just see his eyes, and I said he might even be more dangerous than now because he knows what he's capable of. He knows what he can do. I mean, it's just interesting watching the trajectory of him throughout the course. He's very shy and awkward. But as the time goes on, the film goes on, like when he's talking to the Secret Service agent, he's not awkward at all. He is totally in command and control, which I kind of think means that the delusions have taken over. And I think,
Shepard to go on a date with him, when he walked into the room, he was very in control.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, into the political when he goes on the date?
Yeah, when he walked into the office and said, come around the corner, have ice cream and pie or something with me.
See, that's the thing. See, I thought that was a performance.
Ah, okay.
I thought that was Travis a performance, like a self-assurance. It's like I mean, of course, common sense. Like if we go on a date, we're going to go to a movie. We're not going to take him to an X-rated movie, but just social awareness, the awkwardness, the social awareness, the no interaction with women. If we want to get into it, I can't imagine that he has a very strong bond with. We never learn anything about his parents or anything like that. But
no.
No, they don't touch on his family at all.
That is a good point.
I thought that date was a very good showing that he really had no honest idea of where to actually take on the first date, because to him that theater was the only theater that he could probably afford, that he probably knew was film, so he had a very low maybe intelligence about the
culture,
the theater culture.
And I do want to say something about that too. I mean, even with his low morale with doing that, I mean, the one thing I'll say about Travis, most of those characters he was probably the realist, because Sybil Shepherd's character was the superficial. Jodie Foster would go with any man. I mean, he was the realest person, and he just kind of kept it on his sleeve. That's the one thing I say. I mean, that was a funny scene, but I mean, he was real about it. That's the one thing I say about his character.
Well, I've known people who who have kind of odd hobbies, sort of like that too. Like earlier, we saw him in a scene where he was just at the theater, just watching it as a movie, literally as a movie. He didn't seem to get any kind of sexual pleasure or anything from it.
See, that's the thing is, I don't think he's a guy who has those kinds of cravings, urges. I think
right.
he looked at Sybil Shepherd not as something sexual, but as a conquest. I got the blonde-haired, blue-eyed. I mean, Sybil Shepherd was gorgeous, and I mean that was in those days, when she was absolutely gorgeous.
Well,
and that's what I think he was taken more with, the beauty, and then more than in oh God, this is someone I want to sleep with,
or maybe her innocence.
Well, he made the comment that
he was that girl that you could never touch, but he was able to, because she was above, kind of like that girl that was out of reach,
Yeah.
I thought you were weird. For me, was kind of the impression I got from what
by a simple conversation and interjection. He finally walked in and gave a speech, so to speak. So,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, anyone?
Go ahead.
No, I'm good.
You were gonna say something? Okay.
Say it.
The scene that I wanted to talk about that I thought nobody ever really talks about when they talk about Taxi Driver was the one that Scorsese himself was actually in, it's such a kind of random scene, and yet I think it's really important to the themes of the film because it's a random encounter. It's a really tense, creepy encounter. But what it tells the audience is that Travis isn't the only one who's about ready to explode. That, in fact, his sentiments are shared by ordinary denizens of New York and presumably the country at that time. That people who are just put down by the stresses of ordinary life and by the failure to connect with people, the failure to have those meaningful relationships in the wake of national and personal crises, are, you know, one step away from resorting to violence. And so then that's part of what formulates Travis's bad ideas in his head, is that he sees that he's not the only one, that in fact, you know, this, who we know as Scorsese, but, you know, he wants to kill his wife or lover and wants to, you know, mutilate her body in horrible ways with a gun, which of course is a phallic symbol there. But it shows that the ordinary person can be pushed to monstrous levels beyond recognition when pushed far enough, when the personal stresses of life push them to that place. And nobody ever really talks about that scene, at least none that I've heard, but I thought it was wonderful.
Did you catch him when Sybil Shepherd was first on screen? And he's sitting on the steps watching her walk by? Scorsese?
Yeah, in slow-mo.
Yeah. That's funny. He put himself right in there.
It's a that scene, I mean, just an example of, like, I mean, I think the actor, the original actor, I think he got who was hired for that part that Scorsese did, I think he had got sick on another film and Scorsese took it. And he's brilliant. He is, I mean, he is terrifying in that scene. And the way everything is all set up in that scene, like the way Scorsese's lit and how De Niro is silent. I mean, you really think, like, I remember, like, very clearly the first time I saw it, you really thought that Scorsese was just going to get out of the car, and the next thing you were just going to see a silhouette of him shooting, you know, his wife and whatever. But I think it's a good point. I think that was really a sign of the times. I mean, this is Taxi Driver, along with French Connection and Death Wish. And Joe. I mean, this is a movie where a lot of the lead characters in this movie are, under normal circumstances, hateful, psychotic people. But these were people that were hailed as heroes. When Peter Boyle was mortified when Joe, if anyone knows the movie Joe, he did it in 1970, and it's the guy who directed Rocky, John Alvinson, who just passed away recently. Joe, he plays this racist who he just starts going around and, like, you know, he doesn't like African Americans, doesn't like gays, doesn't like anyone who's fake, doesn't like anything politics. And he just kind of, like, along with him and, like, with Death Wish, the age of the kind of the vigilante, you know, films. They're very popular. I think Taxi Driver, though, it delves into it, you know, deeper in a way where there are parts of the time when I watch the movie, like when he's on the date, where you just you feel bad for him. You feel like this guy is just. I think, like, there's a cluelessness about, like, the way the world works, and but he's incredibly street smart. And I think, you know, in those days in New York, I think in that time, you know, I mean, that's what you had to be. One thing, switching gears, you know, we've talked about Sybil Shepherd. If anyone's ever read, I mean, this movie, you know, prior to this, all of Sybil Shepherd's films had all been her then boyfriend Peter Bogdanovich's films. This film was really a step up, and apparently she, was a pain in the ass to work with, I guess. Like, she was not the first choice of anyone, and I don't think De Niro was terribly happy with her. The person I think who was, oddly enough, was the first choice, would have been really interesting, was Mary Steenburgen. Not a blonde, but like the complete opposite end of Sybil Shepherd. Was anyone
interesting?
Was anyone bothered by Sybil Shepherd's performance in the film?
I was a little bit.
I just felt that she was kind of out of place. I mean,
Quite
she
like
just
a real person. Like she was very distant, like in all the scenes she was in. Like she wasn't all there.
Do you think
It's
she was in
almost
New
like she
Yorker?
didn't want to be there.
I felt she was from out of town. I don't felt like she was a natural New Yorker. I felt like she represented someone from the Midwest who was gradually like finding out what this life was like. So she's volunteering, and I kind of got a naive feel from her. That's what I got from her.
That's an interesting read. Maybe that was intentional, that she doesn't fit into the landscape of Travis's world.
And that's why I kind of felt it was a dream to some degree. It's like that's the dream girl.
Well, that would kind of sync with what at one point he says, you know, I thought you were different from the rest of them, and maybe that's something he's picking up on. He's not from that environment.
It's just interesting. I've read so many film reviews, and the one thing that they harp on that I've read in like 10 or 12 reviews is, why the hell did they cast Sybil Shepherd? I mean, but I mean,
she does seem to be an odd character to put in there. I mean, yes, she is very very beautiful, and she plays the role up to a point. But there's a point in the film where I feel like she's almost like she
was outclassed.
She's there, but she's not. Yeah,
I think
she's outclassed by the big heavy hitters in the film.
I don't think she had and I think one of the things, like they had to do the diner scene or the cafe scene that her and De Niro did, and you know, De Niro, he'll run the scene over and over and over and over and over again before it goes in front of a camera, and she probably just wasn't used to that. And also, Sybil Shepherd is not trained as an actress. She was a model. She was. I think she did like how she was cast, I think, in Last Picture Show, is that, you know, Peter Bogdanovich and Polly Platt, they saw this commercial and said, I want her. And of course, Peter Bogdanovich was in love with her. And then, of course, she just happened to be the innocence and kind of naivete in Taxi Driver that worked for Last Picture Show, because, you know, that's what the character of JC was. But Mike, here's another question. So we have a remake of Death Wish coming out with Bruce Willis.
Jesus Christ.
Do we think if one, I mean, I can't imagine why anybody would, but it wouldn't surprise me if they remade Taxi Driver. One, it would just be absolute sacrilege.
It wouldn't surprise me either, but
it wouldn't work today, personally.
Because it made them money, and they'd rather milk the cow. That's.
It'd be like remaking Back to the Future. You can't do it.
It couldn't work today because that's just a different time period. Like, and I get some of the things that happened in that time period are happening today, but that was nothing I wanted to bring up. Like, look at that 70s New York. You will never ever see that again.
And it's like, something that you can't, a production designer, you can't remake.
Yeah, it's a character. Like in all those movies, I mean, especially the movies that shoot on location back then, like you just can't. Like, I mean, even if you did things in Oklahoma or in the Midwest or even in LA, like a lot of those places are gone now. You can't remake certain things because they're just part of that time period. It's a dated movie.
I want to build my own Taxi Driver, but call it the Streetcar Vendor.
the petty.
Breaks down. That's it. You can't.
The pedicab driver.
Those guys are strong.
Two things.
Fuck it. Why not a golf cart? Why not a golf cart?
All right, guy breaks down on the golf course. He's tired of all the big heavy hitters giving him a hard time. Yeah, I like that.
You could probably do some modernation with like an Uber driver or something, like just somebody who does one of those, who drives for like just apps or something, and like just try to push the story to modern day.
Somebody's going to come along and flush all these apps away.
See, that's the thing. When you make a film, you can set it in any time period, and it could be in like a futuristic time period, or it could be like in a Wild West type of feel. You never know. But
Dana already made the connection to like the political undercurrents like of the time. To the political undercurrents of today. I mean, you could maybe put some thought
any time that there is a political uproar anywhere, you could definitely watch this film and connect with it. because there is definitely a political turn in the film, and
I could get away with a remake.
I think especially right now in these days, I can definitely feel a connection to the Palatine.
We were talking a little about Network before, which is one of my favorite movies as well.
Yeah,
there's a rumored stage production coming up that Bryan Cranston is going to take on the Howard Beale role, which is interesting because, I mean, Patty Chayefsky was always very protective of his work. I mean, of course, and he died. If only he lived. I mean, he died in 1981. If he lived to see the advent of reality television and, of course, the first reality TV president, he would just be like, Arthur Jensen, Ned Beatty's character was right all along. And, I think it's amazing.
Well, not to mention, even before that, not to mention the advent of cable TV and cable news.
Absolutely.
Which was, I mean, that was that show that became Howard Stern, that became Bill O'Reilly, that became Fox News and MSNBC. It became all those things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love Faye Dunaway's character. I like female characters who aren't so like naive. I like these strong women. I want to write these kind of characters where the woman takes control and she's more like ice cold. I get tired when they make these emotional women and they make women out to be so I guess beside emotional, just easily angered and easily hurt. I like strong women that are like ice in their veins.
Well, and that's the thing is,
I like strong women too, but I don't think that necessarily has to mean that they're completely cold and icy. I mean, look at Wonder Woman. There was a strong female who had a wide range of emotions and was very strong and inspiring. And I was like, okay, finally we got Hollywood has finally learned how to write women that are strong as women. It's like, wow, it took you forever, but you finally learned how to do it.
Well, and that was another thing in the 70s, another thing in the 70s that was women roles were stronger in that time. I mean, I think of Jill Clayburgh in An Unmarried Woman, or anything that Jane Fonda or Diane Keaton. I mean, the thing is, Wonder Woman, it's a step in the right direction, certainly, but I don't know if film studios may not just be interested in like stories
the ones that you're talking about are the ones where you're talking about New Hollywood. You're talking about when the business model was pre-Jaws, pre-Star Wars, pre-franchise mentality, back when actual
storytelling,
stories about human beings that weren't meant to be a world, a franchise, a multimedia thing. It could just be good movies, which is not to discount the present system for the ones of those that have worked, but there was a time when something like Taxi Driver could be made by a big studio and all that. And so the kinds of strong female roles you're talking about are inevitably from a different time, a different business model than
But now it's all
talking about today.
Stocks. I mean, everything. It's all about how is these Marvel films going to help the overall stock?
Yeah, studios are in trouble now. They have to make a profit, or else they're in trouble. They just every movie has to be a big blockbuster that pushes their stock price up.
Yeah, which I mean, if you look at the current this last summer's box office numbers, the future of the current model is not doing so well, and if anything, we may be headed towards another potentially a new Hollywood era or just a complete paradigm shift where the independent filmmakers like myself and a few other people here
make it out on top because people like us
the old regime falls based on its own hubris. And I mean that's what my collaborator and friend Lloyd Kaufman would say, that the democratization of filmmaking has resulted in such a thing where you could go out and make your own Taxi Driver right now, could get it either self-distributed or get it through an independent distributor, or even potentially make it in a major market, but in some form. But you can go out and make that personal movie, that's personal to you right now, and
Market it.
words were, and his famous words are, if you make something that is good, the public will find it, which I firmly believe. And so I think that the more that we, the filmmakers, the ones that care about film, the more that we can contribute to the democratization of filmmaking, the more that we can have the we can stand tall while the old regime falls on the basis of its own hubris, because Scorsese himself said that the cinema that he loved is no longer in existence because it's all kind of theme park rides now, which is pretty true. Pretty true. Granted, again, there's been plenty of good ones within that model, but at the same time, what he and many other of the greats that are still alive knew as cinema is not there, but that is where those of us who are the next generation will stand up to those who love film as an art form, can stand up and be the next generation.
Yeah.
All right.
We have one final thought. A discussion of Taxi Driver would not be, I don't think, complete without acknowledging Bernard Herrmann's score.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the last thing. I think he scored it, and then I think he died before the film came out. I think. But I don't have the internet in front of me. But I mean, that, like, the score, I think, really adds, because it just starts out as this nice breezy kind of jazz score, and then
You're right, Tim. He died in 75 in December. You're correct.
Oh wow, yeah. And I mean, this was a guy who, like, did all of Hitchcock's stuff, and I mean, of course, he was very hesitant about doing this because of the content. But thank God he said yes, because I think that, like, it adds to, like, the city. When he's driving in the cab, it just adds to it all. Every time I hear it, it always, like, at first it's always, oh, it's kind of nice and pleasant, and then it gets very dark very quickly.
All righty. Well, I think we definitely had a very good discussion here. I'm going to wrap it up here. So I'm going to ask you both to kind of state a little bit about who you are, what you do, and here at the end of the show, we kind of tell what we do, and then we'll end the show here. So go ahead, Jay Antonio. Why don't you?
Thank you all for having me. It's been a pleasure talking about Night Job. I'm sorry, Night Job, but talking about Taxi Driver with all of you. I've listened to you guys beforehand, so it was really cool. My name is Jay Antonio. I'm a writer-director. I've got Night Job coming out November 1st, and I've got a studio called Sacred 9 Films, and we've got tons of movies coming out in the next several years. We're gonna rock and roll.
Awesome. Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Again, thank you all for listening. I was happy to be a part of this. We could go all night talking about movies. Again, my name is Timothy J. Cox. I'm an actor, and I'm on Facebook at official Timothy J. Cox actor.com. Of course, also my website, timothyjcox.com. Update all of that, regularly. Love to share all sorts of, like, things about movies and keep up to date on everything, all things movies. I would love if there was a return to the filmmaking, the style. I mean, I'm a big Hal Ashby fan, and he made, like, some of the best films of the 1970s, Last Detail. But I'm optimistic. I mean, I love the fact that, Netflix and Amazon seem to be doing some really stellar work right now, and just keep doing what I love, and just keep having a good time.
Awesome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do, and a little bit about yourself?
Who? Me?
Dane.
Me? Yeah, we didn't get the first part.
Oh, me.
The name, like,
you're asking me. Okay. All right, I'll just go. So I am Dane Kyle, independent writer director, currently based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. You can find me and my work on YouTube. You can check out my black and white German expressionist silent film Aeternus, which got a lot of positive reviews from Peyton Reed, who directed Ant-Man, Lloyd Kaufman of Troma, Charles Kyoto of the Kyoto Brothers, and trailer for my upcoming film noir, The Big Blind. Both of those are shorts, but I'm transitioning into features and my own TV show before too long. You can connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, wherever you can find me. My YouTube channel is The Dane Kyle, DaneKeil. Stay tuned. That's where you can find all the latest updates, and you'll be seeing a lot of very important developments later this year, and especially next year when some of these projects that have been in development for a long time finally start to roll out. And that will be when things start to really get shaken up in the world of independent film.
Woohoo!
Yeah,
Katie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
Sure. I'm Katie Cadaver. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm a dead girl with Dead Girls Dark Coffin Classics. I'm also an alternative model and artist and burlesque dancer here based out of Milwaukee. I have a couple of Facebook pages, Katie Cadaver, that's Cadaver with a K, where you can find updates on my modeling and burlesque dancing and performing projects. And then also Third Eye Open, which is 3RDEYE0PEN. That's where I share most of my artwork and the makeup work that I do for the horror punk band Rat Bat Spider. And you can also find Dead Girls Dark Coffin Classics on Facebook, YouTube, and Vimeo.
Awesome. Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
I go to UWM. I live in Milwaukee. The only thing I really have to plug is I have an eBay store, SoberEye636. Nothing is on there right now, but I basically live in a warehouse at this point and kind of have to get on there. So if you want to look at my extra horror movies and probably figures, head on over, I suppose.
Alrighty.
I study film.
And Kate, KJ, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
Right now, I'm in college right now, going for associate in arts degree. I am, trying to dabble around, write a little bit of a screenplay here, write a little bit of screenplay there. Just trying to get consistent. Also have my own group, Timeless Classic Movies. And that's really about it. Just trying to find my way.
Alrighty, thanks for coming back on the show. My name is David Streggy. I write reviews for Movies Galore Milwaukee, which I started about 5 years ago or so. I also run a group where we talk about silent films to current in development projects. Lately, it's been kind of dead there, and everybody just kind of posts. But it is what it is. But in any case, you have been on Inside Movies Galore. This is a podcast for talking about films and hopefully to interview more directors and artists down the road. I'm also a somewhat small-time producer. I'm currently producing several films at the moment, but definitely keep a lookout for my name, and we'll definitely keep in touch. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, J. Antonio, for being on the show. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Good night.
You too.